I would like to request Shri Ritesh Maheshwari, Director, MRAI, to please come and review on the focus on GST, the key to success of Indian Steel Mission 2030.
Good morning, everyone. So it's a nice morning, nice warm Delhi warming, and it's great that after 2 years of lockdown, again we have the opportunity of meeting in person, interacting with each other on person, and hopefully the worst of COVID is behind all of us. So I'm Ritesh Maheshwari, and Director of MRAI. MRAI is one of the apex industry associations for scrap recyclers, traders, scrap users, and who's who of scrap industry in India. And the association has grown by leaps and bounds in last few years. Now we have more than 1,200 members located in India as well as abroad. In a nutshell, anybody who has to do anything related to scrap is a member of our association in India. Thank you so much to AIIFA, Shri Kamalji, for always supporting us and for giving us an opportunity to interact with members of AIIFA and present the case of why the industry is going through a tough phase on GST reforms, and we have been requesting the government through various forums to help us in the same. Can you, okay. So, can you put the first slide? Yes. Okay. So, scrap, as all of us know, is a key raw material required for secondary steel production. And interestingly now, with the concept of green steel, clean steel coming up in the forefront, Shri Paramji ji is heading that initiative in the ministry. We find that more and more primary sector users are also increasing the consumption of scrap. Only a few days ago, I was talking with Tata, and some of you people may be surprised to note, they are currently running as much as 13% of scrap in their basic oxygen furnaces. And this year, they want to increase that percentage to 15 to 20%. So imagine a company like Tata increasing their scrap percentage usage, what kind of demand generation it will generate in the coming few days. And apart from this, currently the GST on metal scrap is 18%. And due to this high rate of GST on the scrap, various small traders engaged in the industry are trying to avoid paying GST on the same, and they sell it out, through our books or bogus billing or fault credit defaulting. And, the bills are traded in the market at a good discount, which is hampering the government for their GST collection, as well as eventually the liability comes on the end manufacturer. Next slide, please. The scrap business follows a pyramid structure. At the bottom of the pyramid, we have a very huge pool of small size collectors who are rack pickers or kabadiwalas, all we call them. Up above them come the small traders who are mostly small aggregators having some kind of a very small district or regional type focus. Then comes the big traders, the big volume buyers, probably concentrating at a state level. And then eventually the end users or consumers of the scrap, which are probably going to melt it. The collectors of the scrap, the small guys, are being very small scale. They don't come under the ambit of GST, and the small traders from them become liable to pay the GST on them. And as we know for a fact that scrap passes usually 3 to 4 or 5 hands before it reaches the industry, hence there is a very high chances that someone, some missing link or some person in the chain tries to default or tries to make a short quick money by bypassing the GST proper schedule and results in loss to the exchequer. Previously, there have been many scams which have been busted of GST. It has also been experienced that the real culprits are easily escaping the GST net because the officials, they usually land up at the doors of the big industrial houses because they know, come what may, the big industry people are not going to go anywhere. So why not take them? This is a leading havoc, and I think our members from across India, from north, south, east, west, everywhere, people are experiencing this hassle. Next slide, please. This slide shows a basic illustrative supply chain of scrap collection process, which I've just explained right now, from Small household scraps that generated, it goes to small dealers, medium dealers, large dealers, and eventually manufacturers. Small dealers, they don't register themselves for the GST. The medium dealers are generally registered under the GST and are required to pay GST at the rate of 18% to the large dealers. However, given the unorganized nature of the sector and 18% GST on steel scrap, medium dealers often, this is the segment we find that often engages in irregular tax input credits, basis of fake tax input invoices without any underlying supply of goods and services. To the extent the input tax credit availed is fake, there is an underpayment of the tax to the government. Reduction of GST to 5% will be exactly taking care of it. Once the slab comes from 18 to 5, the incentive to deceive, the incentive to take bogus bill goes very predominantly down. Next slides. We have prepared an in-house illustrative supply for the government's reference that even if you reduce the GST from 18% to 5%, you will find that there is no loss to the exchequer. The table is well elaborated that the value of basically you're charging the value addition of the scrap. If you look at the right side, if you buy a scrap worth 10,000 rupees, pay GST at 5%, and then you look at a value addition of 1,500 rupees on it, and you sell the material at 11,500, the finished goods continue to get taxed at 18%. So the GST payable by the industry is the same 1570 and the credit taken by the industry is 500. So total GST received by the government would remain 2070. Next slide, please. So we have basically two requests, what Shri Kamalji also mentioned. First is we request the slab to get reduced from 18 to 5% and scrap to be brought under the RCM mechanism. Please appreciate RCM will act a kind of a insurance to the medium dealers or to the genuine buyers that they don't have to worry from whomsoever they are buying the scrap. They will buy piece, they will pay a 5% tax on it and deposit to the government so that any people coming up in the next chain don't get harassed, don't get hassled by the government. And the scrap becomes totally legitimate with all the taxes and duties paid. Right now, the dealers or the medium dealers who do these kinds of bogus billings, or sometimes they pay a tax of 18%, they are utilizing bills from here and there or from some other commodities. And since they deliberately keep the turnover of their companies well below the threshold marks, it's very difficult for the government to scrutinize each and every case. So Kamalji very rightly mentioned just now that 10 years, 15 years from now, we don't want our children or our next generation or people like us to face the hassles from the inquiry from the GST department that 10 years before you bought this much tonnage of scrap and that time probably you did not pay through a proper invoice or your supplier was not a registered vendor, so you are liable for this liability. We really want the sector to get organized. Next, please. Apart from that, the GST, I would also like to mention a small brief that we request, Paramjit ji was mentioning to me in the morning, that how do we augment the supply of scrap? Because most of the users here are going to use scrap. All of us want raw material security for sustainability. So it's our very strong request to the ministry that try and bring a blanket ban or waiver of import duty for a period of 8 to 10 years so that industry can sleep at peace in the night, can focus on their long-term plans and they know that the government has given an almost green corridor for import of scrap because domestic availability remains constrained and they can focus on making value-added green steel by free-flowing the imports from the other countries. Also, I would also like to request AIIFA members over here to please consider try to sourcing the scrap for imported sources in bulk vessels because container freights are going up, shipping lines, all of us know they do not listen to us. Logistics are getting tougher and tougher. So it would make prudent sense for the members to come together and focus on bulk vessels, which will bring in economies of scale, which will give you cost advantages, and which will give you a bulk buying in a single shot. That's our request. I think we are done. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone.